context is...
Welcome to Co-Pilot Podcasts, a single book written across 1,500 years in 3 different languages by dozens of authors on 3 separate continents, and it still quietly runs the legal systems, the art, the moral codes, and the universities of the modern world. Today, we're unpacking biblical history, the major eras that shaped it, the key figures who drove it, the cultural world they actually lived in, and why all of it still echoes in your everyday life. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to map the sweep of biblical history from creation to the early church, understand the real cultural stakes behind these stories, and see exactly how this ancient text became the foundation of Western civilization. I've got someone here who has gone deep on all of this, so let's get into it. Walk me through the big picture first. Where does this story even begin? So the scale of it is the first thing that hits you. According to FamilyBible.org, the Bible covers more than 4,000 years of recorded history, and it doesn't just stay in one place. It moves from the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the deserts of Egypt, to the hills of ancient Israel, to the cities of the Roman Empire. That's 3 continents, thousands of years, and it's all connected. Okay, so how do scholars actually organize all of that? Because that's a lot of ground to cover.
Right. So Bible Navigator breaks it into distinct eras. You've got primeval history, then the patriarchs, then kingdom, divided kingdom, exile and return, the intertestamental period, the life of Christ, and then the early church. Each era has its own character, its own key figures, its own crises.
10 eras. That's basically 10 different civilizations worth of drama.
Honestly, yeah. And the first era, primeval history, runs from creation all the way to around 2100 BC, according to Bible Navigator. It's the opening chapters of Genesis, creation, the Garden of Eden, the fall, Cain and Abel, the flood, the Tower of Babel. These are the stories that set up every theme that follows.
And what are those themes exactly? Because I feel like people know the stories, but maybe not what they're actually doing narratively.
That's a great question. Bible Study Toolbox puts it really well. These early stories establish that humanity struggles with sin, pride, and conflict, but that there's also this persistent thread of mercy and guidance running through it. Cain and Abel aren't just a murder story. They represent 2 completely different responses to God, one rooted in faith, one in jealousy. And that tension plays out across the entire biblical narrative.
So it's almost like the first 11 chapters of Genesis are the thesis statement for everything that comes after.
Exactly. And then you hit the patriarchal era, roughly 2100 to 1800 BC. This is where Abraham enters. According to Bible Navigator, God calls Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees and makes a covenant, a promise of land, descendants, and blessing extending to all families of the earth. That's a massive claim.
And Abraham is described as the father of faith. Right? What makes him such a central figure?
Glory Bible Hub describes him as the patriarch called by God to leave his homeland, who became the father of many nations. But what's interesting is that his story, and the stories of Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph after him, are full of very human moments. Famine, deception, betrayal. Jacob literally wrestles with God. Joseph gets sold into slavery by his own brothers.
Wait, Joseph sold into slavery by his brothers and then becomes the second most powerful man in Egypt? That arc is wild.
It really is. And Glory Bible Hub notes that he ultimately saved his family from famine. So the guy who was betrayed ends up being the one who rescues everyone. That kind of reversal is a recurring pattern in biblical narrative.
Okay, so after the patriarchs, we get to the Exodus era, Moses. This is probably the most cinematic stretch of the whole thing.
Absolutely. Bible Navigator dates the Exodus and Conquest era to around 1446 to 1375 BC. Moses delivers Israel from Egyptian slavery. There are the plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea, the law given at Sinai, the tabernacle worship established. And then, after years of wilderness wandering, Joshua leads the people into Canaan.
And Moses is described as the lawgiver, right? Not just a liberator, but the one who receives the 10 Commandments.
Right. Glory Bible Hub calls him the prophet, lawgiver, and deliverer of Israel, chosen by God to deliver Israel from Egyptian slavery, receive the 10 Commandments, and lead the people through the wilderness for 40 years. He's arguably the most pivotal figure in the Old Testament.
And then after Moses and Joshua, you get the Judges period, which, from what I understand, is kind of a chaotic stretch.
Chaotic is the right word. Bible Navigator describes it as a time of spiritual decline where the absence of a king led each person to follow their own ways, cycles of idolatry, foreign oppression, and then cries for help. And God keeps raising up these deliverers: Deborah, Gideon, Samson.
Deborah is fascinating to me, the only female judge of Israel, right?
Yes, Glory Bible Hub describes her as a prophetess and the only female judge of Israel who led the nation to victory against the Canaanite army. And Gideon, he defeats a massive Midianite army with just 300 men. These are not small stories.
300 men. That's a detail that sticks with you. Okay, so after the judges, Israel gets a monarchy. This is the United Kingdom era: Saul, David, Solomon.
Right, around 1050 to 930 BC, according to both FamilyBible.org and Bible Navigator. And this is where you get David, described by Bible Way as a man after God's own heart, known for his psalms and his leadership of Israel. And then Solomon, known for his wisdom, his wealth, and building the first temple in Jerusalem.
The temple is such a big deal in this whole story. It becomes the center of everything.
It really does. The temple in Jerusalem becomes the focal point for sacrificial worship and the major festivals: Passover, Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles. According to the Bible Hub Topical Encyclopedia, the religious life of ancient Israel was centered on the worship of Yahweh, and the temple was the physical anchor of that.
And then the kingdom splits. That's the divided kingdom era.
Around 930 to 586 BC, the kingdom divides into northern Israel and southern Judah. And this is where the prophets become really prominent. Figures like Elijah, who Bible Way describes as opposing Baal worship and demonstrating God's power on Mount Carmel, and Isaiah, who foretold coming Messiah.